Another Founder Wisdom Pod with Saeed Jabbar with us. He is a builder, a dev, founder at Cadena Dev. We're going to talk about his business, his background, and so forth. Quite interesting guy. Saeed, can you introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about your company?
Hey everyone, my name is Saeed. I'm the founder of Cadena, and we help people like you upskill into the latest emerging technologies like AI and blockchain. And how it works, you come in, you take your course, it unlocks a certificate, and then that certificate then unlocks a whole plethora of career opportunities.
So you've occupied various jobs before. Why did you decided to jump into entrepreneurship with Cadena?
Well, so in the past 7 years, I ran a coding nonprofit. So I was very experienced in the space, and I knew the ins and outs of the coding education world. Um, and so post-COVID, as learning shifted more and more to remote, I recognized there was a big opportunity there, not only with learning being shifted to remote, but then you had these emerging technologies like blockchain really come online, and now all the hype is about AI. And so people are really taking it seriously and looking to upskill. And so it was just a really, the market pointed the direction, and I kind of just surfed that wave.
And it's an interesting problem that you're tackling. So how does one prove or future prove their career? Because you've got nice courses there. Um, is there something such as a badge? Will there still be badges in the future, or will it be like straight up coding tests? What's your take on that?
It'll be a combination. There'll probably likely be more and more badges. I mean, we're seeing things like Ethereum trying to roll out what's called soulbound tokens. We give an NFT badge, and we actually look and verify the projects people submit or the exams they take. So it'll be a combination of things. I'm sure over time someone will train a large language model to figure it out and have a better intuition than a human. But I think they'll have a role, particularly I think the way the world is going, people will have to pick up micro skills. So maybe they're a coder, but then there's a micro skill they'll have to pick up to stay competitive in the market because things are going to be changing very, very quickly, or are already actually.
Right. And last time we spoke, just rewind the clock a little bit here, dive not so deep in your past, but you worked at VaynerMedia, which is like this interesting company. You were a software dev there. How is it to work with Gary? How did that inspire you and kind of launch your career?
I mean, Gary's energy is infectious. I think I was there when there was just 10 people. And, it was a startup then, so you do everything from developing to editing videos. But, he really had a big vision and he believed in that vision, and he is where he is today. But overall, it's a great positive experience. And I think I caught the bug of being an entrepreneur then, and it's never left me since.
You have like pretty prominent instructors on the platform, like folks from Consensus, Gemini, Tesla. And well, you've been hired by Gemini, Tesla, Google, Amazon, Wayfair. What have you learned from these companies or folks working at these companies?
So these are students who have gone to those places. But we have had instructors from some of those places like Consensus and VaynerMedia. Um, and so some of those people are my colleagues that I've worked with. And I was very fortunate to really grow up in the New York City tech ecosystem. I've literally seen the dawn of it all come to fruition. Um, and so as Consensus was riding the Web3 wave, a lot of my friends started to work there, and that's how I knew them and supported them with a few initiatives. But we really wanted to deliver quality instructional material to our students and make sure they're being taught by industry leaders and people with actually on the ground experience and not just theory. So that's why we hired people from places like that.
Right. And what skills or micro skills, as you mentioned, do you judge essential in 2020? Obviously, ChatGPT is a huge time saver just to know how to prompt it and to be creative. And instead of writing to an assistant, straight up writing to it and trying and trial and error. Like, what's your take on it? What's your take on no code? Also, do you think this is like the future, and what trends should we look at and should we adopt as entrepreneurs to be more productive in terms of these micro skills?
I think it starts with mindset and then the tools follows. And so just really having that mindset of, okay, I'm gonna be ahead of the curve, like getting a sense of this is where the world is going, this is how my industry will be impacted by it, and these are what I need to learn. So if you're a copywriter, maybe you're just shaping the copy that the model spit out instead of writing, spending hours writing copy from the start. Or if you're a marketer, instead of spending countless hours on creatives and app copy, maybe you're a better shaper. So just stay in tune of what that unique skill is to your industry. Now, as for like code and no code, I think eventually we'll get to that point where it's potentially all no code. Not feeding into the hype. I think there is a ways to go. But if you're an entrepreneur and you don't know how to code, these tools are really a great place to take advantage of. You can build a quick MVP and go really far. I mean, there's great low code solutions like Iowa Firebase, great no code solutions like Bubble and Glide app. So you can really go far with your proof of concept, maybe even a year or two, and raise venture and scale to thousands of users on these current platforms. And I think by the time you're ready to pivot, who knows, maybe it's fully all no code.
You have the D word in your background, diversity, and I'm looking at the photo of your team, and you guys look like a really cool bunch. Like me, I've always been fascinated by humans. When I look at each of these faces there, my brain is asking, what's their story, and I want to kind of dance with their personality and see and get pictures of my mind and like their experiences, their background, and how they view and live the life differently that I did so far. So what's your take on the D word that gets exploited a lot, so much so that I went to the extreme earlier that year and I called or I asked the question, do you believe that diversity prostituted itself? I believe a bunch of people are prostituting diversity. They're using it as a money slave. What do you think about that quite brash opinion?
Well, given my experience with the nonprofit I ran, I mean, New York City is probably the most diverse place in the world. So you've got people from all walks of life and
That's
all
beautiful.
backgrounds here. And so, there's the kind of industry of diversity, and then there's the actual people. And I was always very protective of our students and not making sure they're exploited in any way for their background. So it's a fine line. Typically in nonprofits, there's this word called poverty porn, and they'll use their constituents to try and raise money. We never did any of that. In fact, I turned down money, didn't rather do that. And so it's important to have integrity and stick to your values. And these people have families. Some of them come from interesting backgrounds. Like we've had refugees from places like Afghanistan. And so it's critically important to me and my team to just protect our students as best as we can. Now, for the wider whole industry, it's a whole lot of conversation, and it's really taken on a life of its own. But yeah, I think overall for me, it's just like we stick to our values and like really protect the people that we serve. When I was running a nonprofit, that was very core to that.
Because sometimes I ask myself, like, are all these conversations just noise? Because for a guy like me and probably you, well, I grew up in Montreal, but I had black friends, I had Spanish friends, I had Arab friends. Although I think throughout the world there's something against Arabs. As per se, there's always this a bit of racism, but the point is, I grew up around a variety of folks, and to me, this is somewhat natural. So, is it my duty to educate this rich, white, old 65-year-old man about it, or can I just shut up and go about it? And because to me, it's been second nature. I think for most of us that grew up in diverse environment too. But is it like worthwhile? Because to me, I think the problem will even fix itself. That there doesn't. To me, it's like almost if we're spending energy to a solution that's already there, which is the aging population and like mindsets dying, literally and figuratively, because the times are changing, right? And now the world is global. And arguably, if there's people that are very racist in this world, it's actually where these people come from most of the time. Why? Because there's no diversity there. Um, Hence, I do think that in the US there's less racism, especially in the melting pot region of the world. I'm not talking in West Kentucky or like in farmlands, people that are by nature isolated and accustomed to seeing their white neighbors. I'm not saying they are racist, but um, is this the right mindset? Because I can see flaws in that mindset as well, just like my thinking that, oh, technology is going to fix the whole climate change thing, so it's kind of futile to talk about it. What are your thoughts on it?
There's always flaws in everything, but I think what's interesting and where we stand in 2023 is there are universal things that we all face, whether you're race, gender, age, and that's this face of automation. You've got people like Elon Musk, who's been running the world forever. And what's interesting is whether you're a white collar worker or blue collar worker, you're at risk. And so now it's really, how do people navigate that new world? And to your point, we live in a global world. Sam Altman's come up with very interesting solutions to that problem. You've got people like Andrew Yang suggesting things like universal basic income. So I think the kind of problem now is more a universal one that all of us face, and it will vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. I mean, in a highly automated society like Japan, they'll have various consequences than say in Oaxaca, where you are in Mexico. Um, and I think it will be like I think we all need to get together to address these problems. Whether it's on the policy side, us as entrepreneurs, and whoever else can play a role in really, giving people the tools. There's only so much you can do,
Right.
right? So and there's tons of tools out there. And from there on, it's up to the individual to figure out, okay, what are they going to leverage and how are they going to navigate? I mean, if you're in a place where there's no universal basic income, how do you survive this new era that we're going to go towards? It's a runaway train and there's no stopping. So you've got to figure out how to navigate it.
Yeah, it's such new concepts. And I think bottom line to what I just said, most of the time, there's no wrong in talking about things. You can only get smarter. I think my point was more, there's a lot of actors and people in this world that do not know how to communicate. They either communicate with bad intention just to spread fear or to profit out of the conversation. And that was more my point, and is it like to have these folks out of the convo? No, it's maybe to teach them how to communicate, teach them values and ethics so that they can add value to this conversation. That's a frustrating thing, to see like people constantly fear mongering about the environment. Or, I think us entrepreneurs or us ambitious folks or us intellectual, we have something against seeing people's games, that they're hiding and calling it out loud. I have this problem when I see folks like constantly using a cause to profit from it. I need to call it out. Now, is it wrong for them to do so? Well, everyone needs to have money in this game, and if they get paid for it, then they spend it back in society. There's also this taxes that hopefully are spent throughout society. So it's not really wrong, but I think that's like my concern. And yet it's with freedom of speech, I think it's a right to call out these folks. With the WorldCoin, yeah, fascinating thing that has never been done on that scale before. Sam, I mean, he's an investor in the project. He's not that involved, but his recent PR tour has been quite interesting. It's a first, that someone goes out throughout the globe like this, I think, to talk with all nations, which really communicates about his intention. I think that's exactly how we should view the world. With my pod, I don't filter out countries. Sometimes I do. If I want money, especially, I'll target the US. But in my pod, I have people from everywhere in the world. I do think it's a business advantage, but it's also cool to get different perspective. And with anyone that traveled the world and talked to a bunch of people around the world, you realize that we're very much similar as human beings, you know. Yes, we've got our little tweaks and culture. I won't call them differences. I'll call them benefits, because added up, like all these little culture tweaks, they are fascinating. But yeah, we're very much the same. We're very much human. And I think we'll realize that even more so with AGI, contacting aliens eventually. I do believe we're going to get in touch with them the next 30 years. But yeah, the interesting point. If we keep on with Cadena, where do you want to take that business? Because I've talked with various businesses in similar niche. I love the direction that you're taking and so forth. How do you want to be different, and what marks do you want to leave, and what financial impact do you want to have, if that's a goal of yours?
Yeah, I really view the work me and my team are doing as being kind of that catalyst moment in people's lives. Like we've taken people from all walks of lives, doing various types of works before they came through our programs, and just to see where they are now, like I said, students at Tesla and Amazon and all these fancy companies. I really want to scale that up to as many people as possible from wherever they might be. In fact, we have tons of students from places like Nigeria and India and Argentina as more and more of the world comes online. So I want to just, on their hero's journey, just be that guy that provides them this course and a book of knowledge to excel in whatever direction they want to go. I don't want to be the gatekeeper and say, go this way or that way. It's up to the individuals. We'll provide the foundations and we'll teach them the hacks. And now from there, they can go, maybe they go build a company, maybe they go build a team around what skill they learn. But I really want to empower the individual, hopefully do that at scale. I also want to attract, the best and the brightest instructors from all walks of life, who have industry experience, because that's part of the problem with colleges and university is you're paying all this money, you go into debt, and the people who are teaching you actually, it's all theory. They've never actually practiced what they're teaching. So we want to make sure we get people who have real world experience and can share that throughout our courses. So yeah, really being that foundational knowledge on people's hero journey, I'll say, and scaling that up for them.
Love it, man. Zuck has tried to provide internet to a good part of the world, and the premise to that is that before giving people money, I do think a lower hanging fruit is education, right? So I've been trying to ponder that challenge for a while. It's funny, I just remember a startup of mine 5 or 6 years ago. I forgot the name. I'll find out, but we basically had the hypothesis or the thesis to give out laptops for free to people in regions of the world. Wanted to start with Latam, which is like our backyard, right? Before Africa, I think Africa is kind of cheesy as well. As like, oh, poor Africa, and all the PR campaigns they've been through. Africa is this amazing place, by the way. I see lots of potential startup wise. I spoke with a very promising entrepreneur and the YC winter 23 batch not so long ago. It was a great interview, and I'm really bullish on this guy's business. I'd love to invest in him. So the thesis was, give them material, but even before the electronic materials to connect them with the internet. Zuck has tried that with his plane that Elon crashed and burned. That was a funny moment. Not so funny for Zuck and Elon though. And Larry and Sergey had tried to launch balloons to connect the world. Let's call the internet connected rate in Africa. Well, we can't talk in terms of zones, right? Because there's zones where there's no one, but let's say that probably 60% of the population is connected to the internet or something like that. How can we make it the 95%-ish that we see in Canada and the US? And do you think this is a nice thesis to have the world advance? Because I do, and just going to give you my quick take on that. I do believe that internet is information plus you can express yourself. It's a means of creativity. It's freedom of speech. And if people are educated and can have a voice in this world, they can be truly human, right? They can be part of the conversation. And it, because I checked yesterday, like North Korea, it is not even connected to the internet nowadays, and people in 2023 do not know what internet is. That's really sad. So what do you think about that? Like, is this a priority? Should this be like number one on the humanity roadmap before we deploy stuff like WorldCoin?
It's a great question. I mean, I was surprised when I was down in North Mexico, for example, in places like Victoria, Monterey, how well those places were connected compared to places even in America. Um, so connectivity ranges. I mean, it's the ideal to get the globe connected, and we see initiatives like Starlink doing that. And Starlink's actually pretty cheap when you compare what traditional satellite internet costs. I think we'll get there within the century because of also demographic shifts. You've got more and more young people coming online. Of course, there'll be pockets that are just offline, whether intentionally, whether it's government. Maybe there'll be intranets that only people in those nations get access to. But I do think access will be universal. What will it be today? No. Maybe by the end of the century, though. I mean, there's some interesting catalyzing things you mentioned, like in addition to AI, potential uh, contact with something else, whatever this other intelligence is. Some people use the A word and call it aliens. But I think we'll see some very, very catalyzing moments in our lifetimes, and it will shape the trajectory of humanity in a whole different direction than we ever imagined. Of course, connectivity is foundational to that, but I do think we'll get there. And one way or another, like people might hack themselves. Maybe they create little mesh networks to connect with each other. We've seen with these protesters, people use AirDrop on their iPhones to share things. So people will figure out their own genius and ways to do that. It's always nice, of course, to have initiatives like Starlink, like WorldCoin, like Internet.org, which Mark Zuckerberg spearheaded. Um, but yeah, I think we'll get there. But I'll stay tuned for what's to come. I think there's some very interesting things with this recent whistleblower on this alien stuff.
Yeah, I've seen it yesterday on Joe Rogan. Well, yeah, let's not get in UFOs today because that'd be a whole podcast. But and I feel this is somewhat conspiracy theory still, but why not? Maybe I'll do one on that. So I really royally messed up in my estimate of Africa connected to the internet. What did I say? I said 40. And in reality, it's 22%. The average in Canada was right though, so good job, brain. Usually it's good at making estimates without knowing, which is like this magical thing, right? It's like GPT. Oh, we don't know where the answers come. Well, nor do I know where the brain answers come from. This is an amazing machine that we have. The African population is 1.2 billion. So that's 60 million folks connected to the internet. Imagine once the 1 billion remaining or so, a bit less, will actually be connected to the internet. Actually, my calculus doesn't make sense here. It's 120 million folks connected to the internet, and imagine when the 900 million will be connected. That will change the world totally. Africa is blowing my mind lately. I never really studied the country, and I'm getting like all of these stats, and literally Africa is 1/8 of the whole world. Did you know that? Did you study Africa before?
No, I'm not familiar with those stats.
It's flabbergasting, right? I don't know why I never studied Africa, but it's getting my attention big time nowadays. Let's finish up with that. You are a meditation teacher as well. What have you learned pairing meditation and entrepreneurship, or just making you a more patient human and more focused human and advancing on your mission?
That's a great question. I really think know when to pause and take a step back. and just evaluating where your personal life direction is going, where your company's direction is going. You know, if you've got a team, where they're going. Um, you know, in tech, we've got this mantra of move fast and break things. And sometimes that's not always helpful. Sometimes taking a week or two for yourself or going on a team retreat and really analyzing, you know, here's where our companies are, here's our weaknesses, here are our strengths. You might get a lot more ROI from just taking that pause and, you know, trying to work 7 days a week and burn yourself out and your team. And so, yeah, that's the one thing takeaway is really stop and take a pause and reflect. And maybe you don't have a weekend or a week, but I'm sure you've got 5 minutes.
Love it, man. And I can tell you, like, from your answers, you just stop without blabbering too much. So you choose your words, and that also communicates to me that you value silence, which is also something that I value. But it's always different in the states that I'm in. You know, when I'm at work, I'm very much caffeinated. It's always go, go, go. Last question, I promise. Do you often struggle between the, because you've probably been on retreat, or let's call it like deep meditations. Do you feel that both are not in sync with another, like, should I call it capitalism or startup world vs meditation? Because when I go on these retreats, often I listen to the teacher and it's like, okay, take your time and everything. I see the value in that, probably recovery time or however you want to call it, assimilation time. But it seems that these philosophies sometimes are not compatible with the startup world. Like, yes, I want to use my heart, but to actually use my heart, I need to use my brain quite a lot, IQ, and then obviously scientifically both are connected, right? So there's heart in the brain. Well, there's brain in the heart, and I don't think there's heart in the brain. But what do you think about these two things? Do you think they're compatible, or do you think they're separate and should be treated as such?
I mean, there might be a space where they're compatible, you know, IQ, EQ. And I think maybe what a lot of these teachers miss is knowing when to step into which one. Um, yeah, the world we live in is not all like peace and harmony and joy. You know, we've got to be action oriented at times, and sometimes we got to step back. And I think it's kind of adjusting for the world we live in. You know, we don't all have the luxury of meditating in a mountain for 20 years and coming out zen. So I think just, you know, taking what you need and leave the rest. If you learn how to quiet your mind for 5 minutes on these retreats, great. That's a good takeaway. But then just applying your own style. I'm all about freestyling, you know, taking, remixing, um, adding bits you like, removing the parts that you don't, and making it your own. Because ultimately, no one's got the right answer to that. It's a very individual thing. And there's tons of tests. I see you're a big fan of the striped spiders test, for example. And they can point us to certain directions, but those things might change. So yeah, I think it's knowing which state to step in with at what point and what makes sense versus always kind of being zen 24/7 and hitting nirvana. I hope you all get there, but we'll see.
Yeah. Uh, Business nirvana, I think, is such a thing as well. I call it enlightenment through startups. I've seen lots of that in my life, lots of lessons, lots of personal lessons that I took from my business life. So thank you so much for that today, Saeed. Where can people find out more about you and Cadena?
Yeah, they can follow me on Twitter, Saeed Jabbar, or email me at saeed@cadena.dev. And cadena.dev is where you can learn more about us and take a course on me.